9, City Hall pointing fingers now at the FBI, asking the feds to stop leaking information about the campaign finance probe involving Mayor Eric Adams.
Yeah, federal investigators returned the mayor's cell phones and an iPad, which were confiscated last week. And we now know that several texts sent by the then borough president, Adams, are now in question. Political contributor Basil Smikle joining us this morning to discuss what these latest developments mean. So good morning, Basil.
Morning.
Thanks for
Good
being with us. So the mayor always seems to be, there seems to be 1 degree of separation with anyone that's been accused of wrongdoing at this point. But these texts are specifically sent by then borough president Adams. A lot of people are saying it's not really that unusual for an elected official or a borough president to send a text like this. What do you make of it?
Well, it is true that if you have a constituent that is concerned about something that an elected official can help sort of cut through the red tape, that's typical. That's certainly typical constituent affairs work, if you will. What I think is the subject of this investigation is, was there a quid pro quo? Was there an action performed because there was money being sent to the campaign, and that money being sent by a foreign government through other actors?
Can we just back up for a second, though, and explain what the text messages were, right? So it was by then borough president to the fire commissioner to get the permits for the Turkish consulate.
Correct. That's exactly right. Yes, right. And so the fact that there is this foreign government involved, that there were donations to the campaign, and we already saw, if you remember, in the summer, some people got arrested because of the straw donations. And so it looks like this investigation has not just gotten bigger, wider, but it seems to be more organized. And I think that's really the crux of this.
So Mayor Adams says that he has nothing to do, and he maintains his innocence, obviously. His campaign issuing a statement. We're going to throw it up right here so folks can see it. He said, as a borough president, part of my routine role was to notify government agencies of issues on behalf of constituents and constituencies, much of what you're talking about. I have not been accused of any wrongdoing, and I will continue to cooperate with investigators. Here's the thing. He had a press conference on Wednesday, faced the media, answered a lot of questions, and did not say, 2 days ago, my phones were confiscated. Should he have been forthcoming with that information?
You know, politically, I would say yes. Legally, I'm not so sure what the constraints are there, but it just looks odd that you had these opportunities to sort of be forthcoming and say, this is what happened. Remember, he was supposed to go to, or there was an expectation that he would go to the Somos conference, which is an annual post-election conference in Puerto Rico every year. And he didn't go, and that was a little odd because there was a huge expectation that he would. And then he gave one example, and it's likely that he did not go because he didn't want to engage in these questions. So, you know, as there's more and more coming out, there is going to be a natural reaction by the voter to say, well, what did you know? When did you know it? And why didn't you say anything at that time? So politically, I understand that there's a need to say something and want to hear from him about what's going on day to day. Legally, he may have a constraint, but, you know, again, as a voter, I kind of want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that New Yorkers are now losing a lot of confidence, which doesn't bode well for him if he plans to run for re-election.
Well, and just think about the fact that, you know, we were in the midst of this migrant crisis, and he's, you know, complained that a Democratic governor and the Democratic president have not been helpful. So the issue is, and I think some of the city council members who were interviewed about this have basically made this point, they want to make sure that he has the political capital to be able to do the work of being mayor of the city of New York. That includes advocating for the city to the state and federal government. So that's why, you know, so it's a bit of a tricky situation for him, because as he's dealing with all of this personally, he has a criminal attorney on retainer.
Yeah.
And so as he's dealing with this stuff personally, can he focus on the city's business?
You know, and I did ask him that, you know, when we did a sit-down interview with him, and he said that this is because there's no wrongdoing, he can absolutely focus on moving. And he famously said now, which everybody picked up, which was well, I said when there's smoke, there's fire, and he said, well, when there's smoke, there's not always fire. But it seems like things are closing in here. So what can we expect moving forward, right? His phones have now been confiscated, returned. Would the former FDNY commissioner, would that be something the feds would look at now? What comes next?
Well, from what I understand, that former commissioner was interviewed.
Yeah.
And so
NAGRA.
I imagine that this is going to expand significantly. We still really don't know what is happening with this fundraiser, because that was just a few days ago as well. So I think, to your point, you know, as you add all of this up, it just gives the impression that, wow, there's a lot going on with this mayor. Can he really focus on his job? I don't expect him to leave anytime soon, but there are all these questions that come up about how can he still do his job and focus on what needs to get done. That's where that political capital comes into play, and that's where you're going to have other elected officials say, you know, can we really get anything from him at this time?
And is there any way to come back from this?
There is in this very unique political environment nationally. I think voters can be very forgiving. In fact, one of the first political rules of thumb that I learned was voters will forgive a liar, not a hypocrite. And I don't know how true that still is. Maybe they forgive liars too, or hypocrites too. But you know, his reelect would be in 2025.
Right.
I think he still has time. You know, Mayor de Blasio faced similar charges, if you will. There was no formal charge brought, but there was an investigation. He did have to appear before federal prosecutors to sort of be interviewed. So, you know, he was able to come back, and it's possible that this mayor may be able to do the same.
I mean, and the thing that's almost was a lot of the folks who may run, they were lobbying, they were talking, those conversations were happening about who might challenge him and primary him, right? And he's very adamant that I did nothing wrong, so he can continue. But moving forward, when you talk about things like the migrant crisis and going in and asking for funds, and not only that, but other important matters happening in the city, would other elected officials start to say, we're not going to get too close right now?
Well, yeah, you could see some of that, but you know, if you're one of the progressive leaders in the city, there had been talk previously that someone would emerge from the left wing of the party, if you will, to challenge him. I imagine this will focus their attention on trying to coalesce around one or two candidates a little bit more. There's a possibility that someone who's independent and somewhat moderate could challenge him in a general election if that lane and that lane may not have been open prior to this. But all of it can still close down. He's very popular with his base, and that matters. And so unless you have the ability to wrest some of those voters from him, you know, he still seems to be okay as long as this doesn't.
And it's very early.
Doesn't get a lot worse, right?
But still, to be a fly on the wall.
Oh
Basil.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Or a fly on the phone.
A fly on the phone. A bug on the phone.
A bug on the phone.
All right, Basil Smikle, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks.
Appreciate your insight.